The Temple of Whispers. Chapter 1. A Message from the Past. The air in Lisbon's Santa Apollonia station was thick with the briny scent of the Tagus River. The morning sun crept across the tiled roofs and historic facades as Ethan Ward stepped off the train, boots hitting the platform with purposeful weight. The clatter of wheels and murmurs of travelers faded behind him as he crossed into the old quarter of the city, where narrow alleys twisted like veins toward the heart of its secrets. He had been here before, years ago, chasing the trail of a stolen Phoenician medallion. But this time was different. A letter had arrived unexpectedly at the Historical Society in Rome. No return address, no formal sender, only a wax seal embossed with a forgotten crest and Ethan's name written in calligraphy worn by time. Inside, the parcel contained fragments of a mystery older than anything Ethan had seen since Petra. A brittle parchment, written in Portuguese and Chinese, spoke of a long-lost artifact known as the Heart of Yao, a jade orb said to contain sacred knowledge, safeguarded by the ancient Dayan civilization. The pages were accompanied by a broken amulet etched with protective sigils, a faded photograph of a mountain range shrouded in mist, and a map drawn in trembling ink, its lines zigzagging through the mountains of Yunnan, deep in China's southwest. What caught Ethan's attention wasn't just the artifact or the map. It was the signature at the bottom of the note. James Hallberg, a renowned explorer and linguist who had vanished in 1936 during an expedition in the region, officially declared dead. But now, over 80 years later, his words had resurfaced. Sophia had been the first to notice the seal on the envelope matched one found in Petra's inner chamber months earlier. It was a subtle mark, 3 interwoven circles flanked by vertical lines, a symbol that, according to ancient Chinese legend, represented the unity of earth, sky, and memory. The connection was undeniable. Whatever had been hidden in Yunnan was not an isolated treasure. It was part of a larger mosaic, something that spanned cultures, continents, and centuries. Their research led them to a small private archive housed in Lisbon's Convento da Graça. There, tucked in a crumbling ledger of colonial shipping records, they found a final clue. A coded journal entry that mentioned the Labyrinth of Echoes, believed to be a myth. Legend claimed the labyrinth protected a sanctuary once guarded by the priest kings of the Dian people, keepers of forbidden texts that predated Confucius and Laozi. Ethan's heart pounded with a familiar mix of excitement and trepidation. Every great discovery came at a cost, and the deeper the secret, the higher the price. That evening, as the sun dipped below the Atlantic and bathed the streets in a warm golden hue, Ethan and Sophia boarded a late flight to China. With them, they carried the map, the amulet, and a growing sense that this new trail would test them in ways the sands of Petra never had. Somewhere in the clouds between Lisbon and Kunming, Ethan looked over at Sophia, her eyes closed in sleep, her hand resting lightly on the leather-bound journal in her lap. He knew the risks, but he also knew that together they had already unearthed legends, and this time they were chasing more than history. They were chasing the echoes of a message whispered across time. Chapter 2. Shadows in Yunnan. The descent into Kunming was smooth, but the turbulence began the moment Ethan and Sophia stepped off the plane, not in the sky, but on the ground. The air was thick with the scent of incense and motor oil, and the city hummed with life, its rhythm pulsing beneath neon signs and the chatter of vendors. But even amid the vibrant chaos, Ethan felt it. A pressure, a quiet tension threading through the noise like a low drumbeat. They weren't alone. Sophia sensed it too. Though neither spoke it aloud, their glances were sharper than usual. At the train station en route to Dali, she noticed the same man lingering near the newsstand. Ethan spotted a black SUV in the mirror of a passing tuk-tuk, matching their pace through the narrow roads of the old town. Someone was watching them. The scroll from Petra had warned them about this. Ancient secrets didn't stay buried for long, and powerful knowledge had a tendency to attract powerful enemies. Casimir Voss was out there, somewhere, and if the message from Lisbon had reached them, there was no doubt it had also reached him. By the time they arrived in Shaxi, a quiet town nestled between jade-colored hills and ancient tea roots, the watchers had grown bolder. A drone buzzed overhead at dawn, and the hotel's receptionist hesitated when handing over their keys. Ethan knew they were being tracked, not just by eyes on the street, but by networks more insidious. He encrypted their communications, routed their research through secure servers, and destroyed every digital trace of their path. But Voss always had a way of staying close without ever being seen. They pushed forward, guided by the clues from the scroll and the fragments of Hallberg's journal. In the village of Shibao, they hiked toward an abandoned monastery carved into the cliffs. There, among weathered statues and forgotten altars, Ethan discovered what he believed to be a directional marker, a carving of a serpent encircling a star map. The pattern matched one from the vault in Petra, a celestial alignment pointing toward the labyrinth of echoes. That night, lightning carved the sky over the valley. Rain lashed the rooftops, and the electricity sputtered out just as Sophia was reviewing notes by candlelight. In the silence that followed, they both heard it, the unmistakable crunch of gravel outside their window. Ethan reached for the dagger he'd taken from Petra, a relic, yes, but also a weapon, and crept to the door. But when he flung it open, there was nothing but the storm. Still, he didn't sleep. The next morning, they met with Marcus, who had arrived quietly 2 days earlier under the guise of a conservation researcher. Disguises had become second nature for their team. Marcus brought new data and troubling news. A private satellite, registered to a shell corporation tied to Voss, had changed orbit and was now scanning the Yunnan region. Surveillance wasn't a question anymore, it was a certainty. Despite the looming threat, Ethan refused to abandon the trail. According to Hallberg's notes, the labyrinth lay beyond a stretch of forest few dared to enter. Locals spoke of echoes that never stopped, voices that carried through the trees even when no one else was near. They called it the Hollow Corridor. On the final evening before their departure, Sophia stood on the balcony of their guest house, staring out at the valley bathed in mist. Ethan joined her, the silence between them heavy with anticipation. Their bond had deepened since Petra. What had begun as professional respect had slowly evolved into something far more personal. But neither rushed the words. The mission always came first. And yet, the way she leaned into him spoke more than any confession ever could. As dawn broke, Ethan packed the scroll, the map, and the broken amulet. The time for study had ended. The journey into the unknown had just begun. Chapter 3. The Hollow Corridor. The path into the Hollow Corridor was barely more than a trail, a winding line through dense, ancient forest that swallowed sound and light. Massive trees, their trunks twisted like coiled serpents, formed an oppressive canopy overhead. Fog clung low to the forest floor, curling around Ethan's boots as he moved, each step swallowed by damp leaves and silence. Not even birds sang here. Only the sound of their breathing reminded them they were still in the living world. Ethan led the way, compass steady in one hand, the serpent and stars marker from Shibao etched into his mind. Sophia followed closely, alert to every rustle in the underbrush. Behind them, Marcus monitored a handheld scanner calibrated to detect underground voids or shifts in magnetic fields, anything unusual that might point to buried structures. They walked for hours, moving deeper into a landscape untouched by time. Twice they passed broken stones with faint etchings, half consumed by moss and erosion. One depicted a hand holding a mirror, the other, a dragon biting its own tail. Symbols repeated in the scroll from Petra. This was the right place. But with each step, the air grew heavier, as though the forest itself were pressing against them. Then the whispers began. At first, they were faint, like wind slipping between branches. But soon, distinct patterns emerged. Soft voices speaking in a language none of them recognized, rising and falling in tones that felt almost orchestrated. Sophia stopped in her tracks, her gaze darting toward the trees. "There's no one there," Ethan said instinctively, though he didn't speak aloud. Still, they pressed on, their pace more cautious now, eyes darting into shadows, ears straining. It was Marcus who found the entrance, buried beneath a slope of ferns and loose earth, camouflaged perfectly into the terrain. A low stone arch, sealed by a massive circular door, etched with constellations and a sequence of strange indentations. The metal was cold to the touch, yet hummed softly, like a heartbeat. "This is it," Ethan whispered, more to himself than to the others. He examined the door. The indentations matched the amulet they'd recovered in Petra. Carefully, he aligned the pieces. With a resonant click, the door shifted, and a low vibration passed through the ground. Slowly, the ancient stone rolled aside. Inside was complete darkness. They activated their headlamps and descended the narrow staircase that curled into the earth. The walls were smooth, carved deliberately, and every few meters bore symbols, some Greek, some Nabatean, some completely alien. The air was stale but breathable, and the deeper they went, the more the whispers returned, now echoing unnaturally through the corridors, overlapping and reverberating in impossible directions. The passage opened into a vast subterranean chamber, far larger than Ethan had imagined. At its center stood a dais flanked by broken columns and statues whose faces had been deliberately defaced. A mural, mostly intact, stretched along the far wall. It depicted a convergence of civilizations, Romans, Egyptians, Chinese scholars, kneeling before a celestial map, and at its heart, a symbol Ethan had seen once before, a spiral carved into stone in Petra, and again in Hallberg's journal. This was a nexus, a convergence point between ancient knowledge systems, and possibly the site of the labyrinth of echoes. As Sophia documented the mural, Marcus paced the perimeter, his scanner now going haywire. Magnetic anomalies pulsed beneath their feet. Ethan, meanwhile, studied a pedestal at the center of the dais. Upon it rested a device, part mechanical, part crystal, unlike anything they had ever found. It was not of any known historical period. It was as if someone had placed a future relic into the past. Then, the trap activated. A low chime echoed through the chamber, and stone panels began to slide into place. Dust erupted as doorways began to close. Ethan shouted for them to move. Again, not with words, but instinct and motion. They sprinted back through the corridors, narrowly slipping through a narrowing exit. Just as the last panel slammed shut, a voice crackled over Marcus's comms. It was garbled, but the name came through clear. Casimir Voss. He had found them, and now he was close. Back above ground, the forest was no longer quiet. The whispers had vanished, replaced by the distant hum of drones and the telltale crunch of booted feet approaching fast. Voss's men were near, and they had weapons. Ethan didn't hesitate. They buried the entrance again, marked it only in a coded message, and retreated into the deeper brush. They had what they came for: photos, scans, partial transcriptions, and the strange artifact. But Voss now knew what they were after, and the real chase had begun. Chapter 4. Flight Through the Depths. Ethan triggered the defense mechanism by twisting the base of the pedestal. The floor split open in segments, separating them from Voss and forcing the chamber to seal behind them. Sophia, Ethan, and Milin descended into a concealed escape tunnel, lit only by bioluminescent moss clinging to the walls. The air grew damp and the tunnel steeper. Suddenly, a surge of water burst through a side crevice, a triggered flood meant to drown intruders. Maylene led them toward a concealed opening, etched with a phoenix symbol. Beyond it, an ancient raft lay ready on an underground river, left there by those who once protected the heart of Yao. They drifted through caverns, past cave paintings and relics embedded in stone. The current grew stronger. Just before a waterfall's drop, Ethan grabbed a rope ladder hanging from a crack in the ceiling. They climbed out, breathless, soaked, but alive, with the orb in hand. Chapter 5. The Sacred Scrolls. In a remote monastery perched on the edge of a cliff, monks welcomed them as if expected. The heart of Yao, it turned out, was a key, activating a hidden library containing scrolls untouched for over 2 millennia. The knowledge wasn't of supernatural power, but of astronomy, medicine, and philosophy once suppressed by invading forces. Ethan realized that the artifact's true value lay not in power, but in preservation. A forgotten civilization had embedded their wisdom in a puzzle of nature and time, hoping only those who sought truth, not control, would find it. Sophia stood beside him, fingers entwined with his. Though the mission was complete, a silent understanding passed between them. Their connection, forged through danger and discovery, had grown deeper. It wasn't just adventure that bound them now. It was trust, memory, and something quietly hopeful. Epilogue. Shadows still linger. Later, as they boarded a small aircraft to leave Yunnan, Ethan caught a glimpse of a scarred figure watching from afar. Voss, still alive, still waiting. The pursuit hadn't ended. The game continued. But for now, Ethan and Sophia had won the day. The past had spoken, the present had listened, and the future, still uncertain, felt just a little more within reach. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Ward and want to keep learning English through more of his thrilling adventures, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. New stories are coming soon.